Chapter 2, Part 2. They left the barn and stood for a moment, blinking against the sunshine of another beautiful day. He must have died in there, sheltering just like we were. I wonder who he was. Just someone else looking for someone or something. Come on, let's go. It's too horrible. Zoe tried not to make the connection, but she couldn't help thinking about William. Was he still lying on the grass in front of the cathedral where he had fallen? She hoped someone had done something for him. With surprise, she found herself wondering about Doobie too. Where might he be now? Lying in the mud somewhere? He'd been like a king on the island. What he said was what people did. He was the only law. Zoe wondered how he would have managed here on the mainland. Would he still have been a leader, or would he have been happy just to be alive and safe? But really, it didn't matter to her now. She hoped she never saw him again, and though she knew she could never forget him entirely, she could try and put him to the back of her mind. With William, it was different. She would remember him as long as she lived, because she wanted to. By midday, they had finished their food. Couldn't you have pinched some more? Asked Zoe. I thought we'd be there by now, Munchkin said. I didn't know there could be so much land. Anyway, I didn't think you approved. Oh, I don't know. I suppose I spent all my time on Norwich stealing things. Just because their owners had left them behind didn't make them mine. It seemed worse stealing from the hospital, that's all. But that's what they're for. What? To look after people. I don't think that's what they had in mind. There's nothing here to even steal from. Munchkin was right. They were sitting on a slight rise in the coastline that showed them the countryside around for many miles. There wasn't a building in sight, just miles of fields that had once been carefully tended by farmers, but which now lay overgrown and hidden. Why aren't there more people here? Zoe asked. What do you mean? Well, if the country got smaller when the sea rose, then there ought to be more people squashed into what's left. I don't know, Munchkin said. He shrugged. Perhaps they wanted to get well away from the sea. Zoe nodded. She could understand that. But there was lots of farming land going to waste here. Maybe there were fewer people than she thought. At least on Norwich I could have gone scavenging for some tins. They walked on, and the day moved on with them. They were beginning to get used to the land now, but only slowly. They'd both known nothing but islands all their lives, and it would take a little time before the mainland felt normal to them. For much of the time they walked in silence. Zoe watched Munchkin deep in his own thoughts. She wanted to know what he would do now, but she didn't dare ask him. Anyway, she barely knew herself what she intended to do. Supposing they got to this place and there was no trace of her parents, what then? At least they should get away from this part of the coast, just in case Doobie found them, even though Zoe knew that was very unlikely. They walked and walked until their legs ached and their feet were sore. There was no sign of new home. I think William was wrong, she said. Munchkin stopped walking and looked at her. What do you mean? This isn't salvation. It's nothing. I know it's taking longer than we thought, but we'll find it. I don't just mean new home, I mean all of it. What is there for us here? You're wrong, Munchkin said. It's much better here. There's people organising things. The nurse at the hospital was telling me all about it. She said the country had been in a real mess, but that things were getting done now. She said in a few years things would be back to normal. William was right. Things are getting better. Zoe didn't speak. Just think about that awful island. I'm glad I'm here, aren't you? Zoe nodded. I just wish William was here too. She walked on and Munchkin followed. Then late that afternoon a town appeared from nowhere. Coming out of a little gully, they walked up over a ridge, and there it was in front of them. There was a piece of board hammered to a stake by the side of the road. On it someone had carefully hand-painted a single word. New home. Munchkin turned to Zoe. Well, he said. It's even smaller than the last place, said Zoe. After a while, it was the same story again, a handful of proper houses in what had once been a tiny hamlet, but with the same mad assortment of shacks and lean-tos thrown up alongside them. Quiet, isn't it? Said Munchkin then. Look, There's someone we can ask. He pointed across to the largest of the houses where a woman had just come out of the door. She was carrying a bucket and started to hobble across to an old well. Come on, said Munchkin, but Zoe hung back. What's wrong, he asked. Zoe didn't reply. She couldn't explain. Quick, she'll be gone in a minute. Munchkin grabbed Zoe's wrist and tugged her after him. Hello, he called. The woman stopped and waited for them to reach her. Yes, she said. Is this where the people from Norwich came? Munchkin asked. The woman frowned. Zoe hovered uneasily behind Munchkin. She wished he'd shut up, but she didn't want to stop him. That's right, she snapped. What of it? Anyway, I've got things to do. She started to walk away. No, wait, please, Munchkin pleaded. This is my friend Zoe, Zoe Black. She's looking for her parents. We think they might have come here. The woman stopped and glared at Zoe. Black? Black? Then she turned to leave. But as she was going, she stuck a finger out. It pointed to a small cottage that seemed to cling to the big house for support. You'd better go in there, the woman grunted as she hobbled off. Zoe knocked at the cottage door. After much persuasion from Munchkin, he hung back behind her and watched as Zoe's knuckles struck the feeble wood. Almost as soon as her last knock had died away, the door swung open. Zoe looked up at the man who had opened it. It was her dad. They went inside, then Zoe just stood. She felt numb. She had tried not to think about what might have happened to her parents. It was too painful. But sometimes when she needed a little hope, she had allowed herself to imagine finding them. In her mind's eye, she had seen this meeting several times. She would rush into their arms. They would all be crying and laughing. But now Zoe just stood, feeling nothing. Munchkin, who had slipped in behind Zoe, tried to hide himself. He hung back in a corner, but it was a small room, and even he couldn't disappear in it. Zoe stared at her parents. Her dad was standing where she had shoved him when he had tried to hug her. Her mum was sitting in a makeshift bed by the side wall of the cottage. Why didn't you come? Zoe said quietly. Zoe, darling, we tried, her mum began. Her dad reached for her, but Zoe backed away. Why didn't you come? She said again, louder this time. Anger rose in her. Zoe, Mum wasn't well, said her dad. I know, but that was ages ago, Zoe yelled. Why didn't you come? Zoe, why? Zoe shouted again. She trembled. Mum was ill for a long time. We couldn't get a boat then. Are you still ill now? Zoe said. She spoke a little more calmly, but she still shook with rage. Her mother didn't look ill. She looked better than Zoe could ever remember. Rob, just show her, said Mum anxiously. Her dad looked at her mum with a question in his eyes, and she nodded hard. Go on, she said. Zoe didn't understand what she meant. She watched as her father moved around behind the bed. For the first time, Zoe noticed a small cardboard box sitting on a high table. Her father lifted the box down, carefully, so carefully, as though it was made of glass, not cardboard. Zoe stared, struggling to comprehend. Gently, her father put the box down at the foot of the bed. Zoe looked at her father, who pointed into the box. There, lying on some of the cleanest, whitest sheets Zoe had ever seen, was a tiny creature. Zoe gazed at its little hands and its tiny fingernails. She stared at its little crop of fluffy black hair, at its minute ears, at its beautiful, calm, sleeping face. She looked up at her parents, but just for a second. Oh, what? Zoe began, but she couldn't speak. She looked at the baby again. It's a him, said her dad, daring a slight smile. Your baby brother, Zoe. I'm so sorry, but there was nothing. Mum's quite old to have a baby. By the time we knew she was pregnant, we couldn't risk coming to get you. She was really ill. Then he came early, and we didn't get down to the hospital in hope. It was touch and go. But Zoe wasn't listening. Tears were streaming down her face. One of them splashed onto the baby's tiny face, and he moved a hand a fraction, but he kept on sleeping. But she still couldn't find the words. Her mum got out of bed and put her arms around Zoe. Do you like him? Zoe nodded, biting her lip. You don't hate him for stopping us from finding you? Oh no, she said. He's lovely. I was so worried about you. How did you get here, Zoe? Asked her father. I rode, and I ended up on an island, and Zoe broke off, staring at the baby again. He snuffled slightly, but still kept on sleeping. It was terrible, Zoe went on. You went there. Mum's pendant, the island, I got stuck there. And that awful place, said her dad. My God, we didn't dare go ashore. The people, they were like animals. We could tell that from the boat. Animals, Zoe echoed. Munchkin shuffled uncomfortably. Oh no, I mean, said Zoe, turning to Munchkin. Not you, the others. They were all like animals, all except you and... Well, don't worry, Zoe, her mum said. Things are better here. Zoe turned back to her mum to speak, but her dad got there first. That's right, he said. They may have been wild animals on that awful island, but it's different here. At least people have remembered what it means to be human. Her father's words reminded Zoe of something she had heard someone else say not very long ago. That's what William said, she said. William? Asked her mum. Is that your friend? She looked at Munchkin. Oh no, Zoe said. This is Munchkin. Munchkin, that's a... Yes, Mum, said Zoe, laughing. He knows it's a funny name. Munchkin smiled. Hello, Munchkin, Zoe's mum said. He smiled again and mumbled something. So who's William? Zoe's dad asked. He helped me on the island. I wouldn't be here without him, or Munchkin. Then suddenly Zoe realised something. She looked at her baby brother. What's he called? She asked. Nothing yet. He's only a week old. Mum's still getting better. Please, said Zoe. Please, can we call him William? Her mum and dad looked at each other and nodded. Zoe gazed at Munchkin, at her parents, at baby William. And as she looked at her family, she realised that it had grown. There were 5 of them now. Yes, she thought, 5. Okay, so that is the end of the novel. I will be really interested to see your book reviews. Hopefully, if you've started them already, then obviously you can add more to them now you've heard the whole story. Okay.